What if your thoughts aren't being produced inside your skull at all? What if your brain is less like a generator and more like an antenna? You've been told consciousness is what the brain does, the way a liver makes bile. But imagine the opposite. Imagine consciousness is everywhere, like a field, and your nervous system is simply the thing that tunes into it. If that sounds impossible, ask yourself a simpler question. Why does experience feel like anything in the first place? Start with something you know too well to notice. Your brain is made of cells. Cells exchange chemicals and electrical signals. You can map activity, you can measure voltages, you can watch networks light up. And yet none of that looks like the redness of red. None of it contains the taste of coffee. No scanner shows you the moment pain becomes pain. This gap has a name. Philosophers call it the hard problem of consciousness, popularized by David Chalmers. Even if you knew every fact about neurons, you'd still be left with one question: why is there an inner movie at all? Now look at another oddity. Your experience is unified. You don't feel your vision in one room and your hearing in another. It's one seamless world stitched together, but your brain is not one seamless thing. It's a vast collection of specialized systems, spread out, running in parallel, with delays and noise. You can even measure those delays. Your brain constantly edits time, binding sights and sounds that arrive at different moments into a single now. Somehow, disjointed processes become a single point of view. And then there's sleep. Every night you lose the world. Your eyes still exist, your ears still exist, but the you that watches and decides fades, then returns. Not because the atoms changed, but because the system slipped into a different mode. If consciousness were a field, you might expect exactly that: a receiver that can tune out, distort, or lock onto different channels. Some observations make this feel even stranger. Under anesthesia, the brain doesn't simply shut off. Neurons still fire, blood still flows, yet the person is gone. Researchers studying anesthetics have found that what changes is often not raw activity, but coordination, how different brain regions communicate and integrate information. It's like the orchestra is still playing, but the music is no longer coherent enough to be heard as a song. Near the edges of life, the mystery thickens. There are reports of vivid experiences during cardiac arrest, when the brain is severely compromised. Some of these stories are later embellished. Memory is fragile, and people are suggestible. But not all cases are easy to file away as fantasy. Scientists have investigated near-death experiences for decades. They can sometimes be linked to oxygen deprivation, disinhibition, and surges in brain activity as systems fail. But the fact remains: at the boundary where you'd expect darkness, some people report clarity. Now widen the lens. In physics, fields are not exotic. They're the default. Electromagnetic fields fill space. The quantum fields of the Standard Model are, in a sense, what matter is made of. A particle can be described as an excitation in a field. Reality, at its deepest level, looks less like little billiard balls and more like continuous, invisible structure. So a question forms naturally. If the universe runs on fields, why would consciousness be the one thing that must be trapped inside meat? Maybe experience is not produced, but accessed. Maybe your brain doesn't manufacture awareness the way a factory makes cars. Maybe it filters an ocean into a stream. And there's a practical reason this idea keeps coming back. No matter how much neuroscience advances, you only ever see correlations. This pattern of firing goes with fear. That network goes with face recognition. Disrupt this region and speech collapses. Stimulate that region and a memory flashes. It's powerful evidence that brain states and conscious states are tightly linked. But correlation alone doesn't tell you what consciousness is. It tells you what it rides on. Now the implications start to expand. If consciousness is a field, then your self might not be confined to your skull in the way you think. Your brain would be a boundary, not the source. Individuality would be real, because each nervous system tunes differently, but individuality wouldn't be the whole story. Like radios tuned to separate stations in the same room, you'd be distinct receivers in a shared medium. This could even explain why consciousness feels both intimate and mysterious. You can't find the screen where experience appears because the screen isn't a place. It's a relationship, a coupling between a system and something more fundamental. You could connect this to one of the strangest facts about you. Your body is constantly changing, yet the sense of I am persists. The atoms in your skin, your blood, parts of your bones, cycle out over time. Your memories distort. Your personality drifts. Yet there is continuity, like a signal that remains recognizable even as the hardware wears down. Then you stumble into one of the biggest coincidences in science. The universe is not only mathematically describable, it's describable by you. Your brain, a product of evolution, can model black holes, quantum mechanics, and the early universe. That doesn't prove anything about a consciousness field, but it adds to the atmosphere of weirdness. The mind seems oddly at home in the structure of reality. Some thinkers have taken this seriously. Philosopher and psychologist William James, in the early 1900s, suggested the brain might transmit or filter consciousness rather than produce it. More recently, philosopher Aldous Huxley popularized a similar, reducing valve idea. The brain as a limiter that narrows a broader mind into a survival-focused stream. In contemporary philosophy, there's panpsychism, defended in different forms by thinkers like Galen Strawson and Philip Goff. The basic idea isn't that rocks think like you do. It's that the building blocks of reality might have extremely simple forms of experience, and complex consciousness emerges when they combine in the right ways. Not proof, not consensus, but a serious attempt to solve the hard problem without declaring consciousness a magic trick. In neuroscience, there are theories that focus on structure rather than substance. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory tries to quantify how much a system integrates information, suggesting consciousness corresponds to this integration. Bernard Bahr's global workspace theory, later developed further by researchers like Stanislas Dehaene, describes consciousness as information that becomes globally available across the brain. These theories don't claim a cosmic field, but they do treat consciousness as something defined by organization, like a pattern that could, in principle, appear in different substrates. And then there's the temptation to bring in quantum mechanics. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff proposed the Orcher theory, suggesting quantum processes in microtubules might relate to consciousness. Most neuroscientists remain skeptical, in part because the brain is warm and noisy, which makes long-lived quantum coherence hard to maintain. But the fact that respected scientists have even tried to connect physics to experience shows how deep the puzzle runs. At this point, you might feel the hypothesis tightening. The brain correlates with consciousness, yes, but perhaps it correlates the way a dial correlates with music. Change the dial, and the song changes. Destroy the radio, and the music you hear stops. That doesn't automatically mean the music was created inside the radio. But then comes the turn that refuses to be ignored. The dominant scientific view is still that consciousness is an emergent process of brains. Not because scientists hate mystery, but because the evidence linking mind to brain is brutal and specific. Damage a tiny region of cortex, and a person can lose the ability to recognize faces while still seeing everything else. This is prosopagnosia. Lesion another region, and language comprehension can unravel. In split-brain patients, studied famously by Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga, cutting the corpus callosum can lead to two streams of processing that behave like partially independent minds. One hand buttons a shirt while the other unbuttons it. One hemisphere knows a word the other cannot say. If consciousness were a single field simply received, why would severing a bridge of tissue split the apparent unity of the self? Under anesthesia, the loss of consciousness tracks changes in connectivity and complexity in ways that are measurable. With psychedelics, changes in network dynamics correspond to changes in reported experience. With deep brain stimulation, specific circuits can alter mood, motivation, and even the sense of agency. These are not vague correlations. They are precise levers. And development matters. Babies do not arrive with adult consciousness. The brain matures, networks organize, sleep cycles change, attention stabilizes, language arrives, self-models grow. If consciousness were mostly outside, why would its apparent richness track brain development so closely? From the mainstream perspective, the brain isn't an antenna. It's the thing doing the work. Consciousness is what certain kinds of information processing feel like from the inside. The hard problem remains, but the practical map is clear. Change the brain, change the mind. Break the brain, break the mind. So does that destroy the field idea? Not completely, it just forces a harder question. Because even if you accept that consciousness is an emergent brain process, you still can't point to the moment matter becomes experience. You can describe mechanisms, you can build models, but the why still slips through your fingers. Emergence can feel like a label for ignorance, a way of saying, it happens here, without saying what it actually is. And the field hypothesis has its own weaknesses. It struggles with testability. If consciousness is a field, what is it made of? How does it interact with neurons without violating known physics? Where is the equation? You can't just borrow the word field from physics and hope it carries the same predictive power. Without measurable predictions, it risks becoming a poetic metaphor. Yet the mainstream view has a different vulnerability. It can map function and still miss essence. It can explain behavior and still not touch experience. You could, in theory, build a machine that perfectly imitates pain behavior. But would it feel pain? Science can track the circuitry of suffering, but whether circuitry is identical to suffering is a philosophical step, not a measurement. So you end up in a gray zone. On one side, the brain is undeniably tied to the mind, down to individual synapses. On the other side, the existence of experience itself still feels like a foreign substance in a universe of equations. Maybe consciousness is a process. Maybe it's a property. Maybe it's fundamental in a way we don't yet have language for. Maybe field is wrong, but the instinct behind it, that experience might be woven into reality more deeply than we assume, might still be pointing at something. And then you look back at your own life. Every certainty you have arrives inside this invisible interior space you can't show anyone. You can share data, words, brain scans, theories. But the raw fact that you are having an experience right now is the one thing you never learn from the outside. So here's the unsettling possibility. The question isn't whether consciousness is produced or received. The question is whether you've been asking in the wrong direction. Maybe consciousness isn't a thing inside the universe at all. Maybe it's the way the universe becomes knowable, locally, briefly, through you. And if that's true, then the most scientific act might also be the most personal one. To keep investigating the world, while remembering that the deepest mystery is the one doing the investigating.